Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the University of Worcester Study Skills podcast. I'm Kate Courage from Library Services, and from the library I'm also joined by
Sykes,
and from the Centre for Academic English and Skills,
Christina Wright,
Ruth Edge,
Kieron Dann.
And today we are talking about writing introductions. So, question for colleagues from the Centre for Academic English and Skills, why would you say introductions are so important?
We want to establish interest, particularly for the reader. Like any type of reading, when a reader starts reading something, that you want them to be interested in it. You don't want them to suddenly switch off after the first one or two sentences. So your introduction is a way of gaining interest into your topic and slowly gaining development on the area that you want to focus upon.
Yeah, establishing the interest is really key, I think, establishing the importance of the topic so that the reader wants to read on. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Without the introduction, just to go straight into the content of an essay would be it'd be too blunt, and I don't think the reader particularly would know. Okay, well, where is this going to lead? What is being developed in this essay? What is the purpose of this essay? So I think the introduction is a really important way of introducing to the reader exactly what they're going to read, preparing the reader for what they're going to come across in the essay.
It's about establishing context, ultimately. So you want to establish a little bit of background about the topic. You want to really give an indication of the importance of the topic and the relevance of the topic. Why is it worth writing about? Why should somebody be interested in this? So within the introduction, you're establishing that the context, the importance of the context, and the relevance of it. And again, all of that will hopefully gain interest from the reader.
I think that first sentence, you need a clincher first sentence that establishes the importance of the topic either for society or for the discipline. Okay, so you want that first sentence to grab the reader's attention, but also establish, the importance, why writing about this topic is so important and why reading about it is important. And I think that's where we were going to mention the Manchester Phrase Bank. University of Manchester Phrase Bank is very good, I think, for giving ideas for what to include in an introduction, especially that first sentence. Yeah, you usually find, I think, in the first sentence, you've got words like essential, crucial, words that show, the topic is important.
If we look at it structurally, like in every area of an academic essay, you can actually dissect the structure quite easily. So a good starting point is to really think of a structure of an introduction. So the beginning part that Chris has just talked about, establishing the importance, would very often be called a general statement. So it's setting the scene ultimately of the topic and the importance of it. The next part is where it's often termed as a thesis statement or purpose statement, is again where you're establishing a little bit more in the direction of what you are going to be focusing upon within your discussion. So you're establishing the topic in the general statement, and then you're looking in the thesis statement some sort of subtopics within it, and these are quite clearly your areas of interest and concentration. Following that, you would have the preview, sometimes called the scope, where you're establishing the parts that most people would be aware of, which would be this essay will focus upon. And you're basically giving almost like a written list of contents, what's coming first, what's coming second. So you're indicating to the reader exactly what they're going to be reading and in what order. And all of that establishes structure, organisation. It makes your work look very professional and neat.
Yeah. So I was going to say I agree, and I've read a lot of essays where students start with their opening sentence is the purpose of this essay is to blah blah blah, and I do find that quite a boring way to start. And I agree. I think that purpose statement or thesis statement should come further on in the introduction once the general background, the context is established.
But it's quite nice, that model that you described of having, sort of general statement, thesis statement, scope. It contains it, but doesn't it sometimes you find introductions go on and people feel that they need to do lots of scene setting, background, and actually you're not going to get a lot of marks for that. I think generally it's much more that kind of focus that you described.
So I mean, what not to include in an introduction is, like you say, too much background information, too much scene setting.
Because that information, if it is important, you are going to concentrate upon within the body of work. So the body is where your discussion is really, really taking place. The introduction is just basically introducing the topic. That's all it is. And the real conversation, the real discussion will come on in the following paragraphs. I think structure is a really nice way, particularly for students that are just starting writing. It's a way of ordering their minds and how they can put things and present things in a particular professional, academic manner, and it's a good starting point just to keep that in mind.
I think as a guide as well for all students, as a guide, not as a rule, but an introduction is approximately 10% of the total word count. So if you have an essay that's 1,000 words, then your introduction is only going to be 100 words. And there are some things in introductions that can change depending on the type of writing that you're doing. So you might want to define some terms in some introductions. You might want to give some limitations in some introductions, but these aren't necessary for all introductions. And so you have to look at your essay and decide, okay, well, what information is important for that introduction, and to work within the scope of approximately 10%.
I think it's the University of Reading where I read that an introduction is like a map. So it places you somewhere, and then you look at the map and it shows you where you're going and how you'll get there, and which I thought was quite nice.
Sort of provides handholds for the reader as they work their way through.
And I find that with essays that if I find that an essay seems to be going off track a bit, I will look back at the introduction to see what the student has said they intend to show and intend to write about, and how they intend to organise their points. So I find that I sometimes go back and check what they've said that they're doing in the introduction they're actually doing. So
and in that sense, it's important to remember the introduction is fully flexible. So there are some there's some guidance that says you write introduction last at the end of your essay. Some people prefer to do that. Personally, I wouldn't. I would write it first just to get a chronological understanding of what's coming. But of course, you can keep going back and changing it, because your real discussion is taking place in the body. So if you come across one particular topic point you put in the introduction, and it's not really coming off, and you think, well, actually, no, I'm going to take this out and move in another direction. You can do that, of course you can, and just make sure, obviously, you change your introduction to suit that as well. So fully flexible.
Or maybe you've changed your mind, your argument.
You've
been critically evaluating all the evidence, and you've thought, I'm querying this now. So
actually, maybe that's the point, isn't it? Definitely make sure you come back to your introduction at the end. You don't have to write it at the end, although I've definitely heard that advice as well. People don't write it, but you have to make sure that you come back to it. You check that you did do what you said you would do, because as you say, it's so easy, isn't it? To think, actually, well, for good reason, it has changed. I'm thinking something different now halfway through.
That's it. You're setting a series of promises to the reader. You're establishing that in the introduction, this essay will. You're promising a certain order of discussion. And then if you change your mind and move on to something else, but you haven't changed your introduction, then you're going back on what you promised. So obviously, you've got to keep going back and making sure everything ties in equally together.
That was Christina Wright, Kieron Dann and Ruth Edge from the Centre for Academic English and Skills, and Kate Courage and Ros Sykes from Library Services in conversation about introductions. Thank you for listening.